Good morning. Last Sunday, we had the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000. And as I mentioned, when you count women and children, there probably were at least 15,000 people there, a small city. And they were fed with 5 loaves and 2 fish. 5 loaves and 2 fish. One of the Gospels said they wanted to carry Jesus away and make him king. But he disappeared by himself and went up on the mountain to pray. This Sunday's gospel immediately follows that miracle. After the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus sent his disciples away in a boat to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Then he dismissed the crowds, and finally he goes up on a mountain to pray, all by himself. Meanwhile, the boat was being tossed about by the waves, for the wind was against it. The word translated tossed about literally means harassed or tortured. I had an experience of that in a small sailboat off Narragansett Bay in Rhode Island. A storm suddenly came up, and the wind was tossing the waves, and water started to pour into the boat. We emptied our bags that had our clothing and gear, and we used the bags as buckets to bail out the water. But the water was coming in as fast as we could bail it out. Thankfully, we were only about a half mile offshore. It was the middle of the day, and we made our way to land. The disciples were much worse off. It was the middle of the night, and they were several miles from land. And the 4th watch of the night means the disciples have been suffering in the storm and waves and water for 10 to 12 hours. 10 to 12 hours. Why is there suffering? Why is there suffering? Jesuit Father Cornelius Lapide said the following about this situation. Christ permitted his disciples to be tossed about for so many hours by a tempest so that he might accustom them to endure adversity and difficulty, and also that they might learn to pray to God for help. Now remember, most of us, most of the time, rely on ourselves when there's struggle and not on God. There's a famous verse in St. Paul's letter to the Romans that captures this idea. Romans chapter 5, verses 3 to 5, that says, suffering leads to perseverance. Perseverance leads to proven character. Proven character leads to hope. And hope does not disappoint. Let me repeat that. This is really important. Suffering leads to perseverance. Perseverance leads to proven character. Proven character leads to hope. And hope does not disappoint. Why suffering? Why suffering? Well, hard times and troubles help build our inner strength. Perseverance, staying strong during tough tests, helps shape true character. And trusting God gives you a strong hope that never lets you down because of the love of God poured into our hearts in hope. We all have experience of chaos in a world out of our control. We experienced during COVID. My sister-in-law still deals with people struggling from the effects of COVID. She's a psychologist. We experience with all the wars going on around the world, turmoil in our nations, turmoil in our cities, turmoil in our families, and even turmoil in our minds. We all have experiences of suffering. Our first parents messed up. They traded paradise for a shiny apple. And when your parents mess up, you're going to be affected too. We live in a fallen world. And before we blame all our problems on everybody else, let us remember that you and I continue to mess up. No one is perfect. When the disciples saw Jesus walking on the water, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. Jesus replied, "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." Peter said to him in reply, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said, "Come." Peter got out of the boat, and he began to walk on water towards Jesus. My first impression of what Peter said and did seemed to me kind of an impulsive, unnecessary act. However, St. Teresa of Avila, one of our great saints, complimented St. Peter for throwing himself into the sea, taking a literal leap of faith. Father Jacques Philippe, a famous French retreat master, said that one of the reasons for experiencing fear is that we've not experienced concrete divine providence. We've not left space for the Holy Spirit in our lives. We never give the Holy Spirit a possibility to intervene. We calculate everything, anticipate everything, resolve everything, counting entirely on ourselves instead of counting on God. He likens it to experiencing the protection of a parachute. How many people have jumped out of a plane? Is there anyone here? Oh, we got 1, 2. Anybody else? So we got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, 6 people have jumped out of a plane. I'm going to ask you to come. No, I'm just kidding. So for the rest of you who've not jumped out of a plane, you have to jump out of the plane first to experience the protection of a parachute. You have to make a leap of faith. Until then, trust in a parachute is an abstract concept. After that, it becomes real, very real. It's an attitude of the heart. It's like tithing or giving 10% of your income, which I tried so hard to do as a layperson and never quite accomplished. You don't know how you'll make it until you do it. Father Jacques makes clear, though, that God is not asking us not to plan, not to take care of matters. However, because much is out of our control, like the storms of life that suddenly come up, rather than having fear like the disciples had, we need to place our trust in God and focus our eyes on Jesus. Now, I'll admit this is not easy. Worry is one of my weaknesses, as I've mentioned before. However, every morning I try to say the surrender novena, to pray in the face of challenges. There's 3 steps. First, calmly close the eyes of your soul. Give no thought to tribulation, no thought to worry, no thought to anxiety, and say, "Oh Jesus, I surrender myself to you. Take care of everything." I gave this to someone this morning. And note what happened when Peter took his eyes off Jesus and looked at the wind and the waves. He became fearful and began to sink and cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus stretched out his hand and caught Peter and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Doubt literally means to be of 2 minds. Peter's mind was caught between reliance on the judgment of his senses, what we see and hear, and relying on the trustworthy call of Jesus. And don't we do this too? So often we act like that's all there is. Sure, there's a God, but he's way out there. You know, he's got bigger fish to fry. He's got the war in the Middle East, opening up the Strait of Hormuz, the war in Ukraine. He doesn't have time for me. And hey, angels, that's for little kids. No, no, no. This church is packed with angels. In fact, could everybody move to the center of the pew so we've got space for the angels? I know, I'm kidding, but it's true. This place is packed with angels. And God cares about each one of us and knows each one of us by name and has a plan for us. And Jesus said, even the hairs on your head are counted. And I'm not talking about Joe here. I'm talking about, some of these women with full heads of hair. Your hairs are counted, Jesus said. So when we face trials and troubles and tribulation, we need to remind ourselves that God is in charge. He loves and cares about us, and we need to put our trust in Him. We need to keep our eyes on Jesus. We need to do what Peter did and take a leap of faith. And when we walk through the dark valley or the stormy waters, we need to remind ourselves, don't do what Peter did, but keep our eyes on Jesus and not look like he did at the storms around him, not look at our worries, not look at the tribulations we're facing, not look at the anxieties and the concerns we have. And if we do that, we will have peace, which surpasses all understanding, even in the midst of trial and struggles. God bless you all.